I don't know if Alex knows this, but I have a fifth book coming out from University of Pittsburgh Press in the spring, which feels like it's around the corner. And so I wanted to read a few things from that book. It's called Whirlwind. I'm having difficulty with this. And you know, I guess I don't think of myself as writing political poetry per se, and there's one poem in the manuscript which I feel like I want to dedicate to people down on Wall Street. It's much more about, you know, the various Gulf Wars, but if you think about all the billions that were spent there instead of on education, healthcare, you name it, rebuilding our cities, I think it's a related issue. It's called Phonography. The first time, early morning, he asked to hear, no, to see, really, how the phonograph worked, how the arm with the needle moved across the turntable, then down onto the huge spinning licorice disc. I pulled out the 3-album recording from Woodstock, slid out the middle record, then put down the side where Jefferson Airplane sang, always half intelligibly to me, look what's happening out in the streets, got a revolution, got to revolution. With Grace Slick, I did the monkey there in my bedroom at 8:30 in the morning, in the early days of 2005, nearly 36 years later, as my 6-year-old looked on. What could he understand from that time? Too young to realize we were there all over again, the young men and women this time, dying in ambush in the desert instead of the jungle, the massacres, the tortures, and we still needing some music to magnify our passion. Why does that moment with him looking on have a shimmer, even an aura around it, so years from now, as years from back then, when I was 13 and just slightly too young to have been there, still I was there, even as I was caught in Brooklyn, not yet smoking pot. Why is that yearning still palpable, that moment all these years later? Whatever there was to remember, I still remember. The deceit in high places, our need for a revolution, so that in 12 years my own son won't have to dodge the draft. With his long hair and his wild ideas, he'll be sure I can't conceive of, but will contain echoes of something I have nearly lived. In many ways, it's an uncharacteristic poem in the book, which I think of as my divorce book, for lack of a better way of thinking about it. And so here's one of those poems, which is about, I mean, we're all here readers, and we're doing this reading, and so this is a poem called Sunglasses in the Subway. Sunglasses in the Subway. I knew was a very bad sign. We'd just come from the marriage counselor, and what had he said? What ice stormed my heart? His declaring he'd lost all empathy for me, his wife, this doctor of empathy? Or was it the argument over reading, how I wanted him to read with me in bed, and his refusal? So that now on the subway he announced he would read. How is it possible to use reading as a weapon, a wounding shield? The shutters slammed down, and there wasn't a peephole of light. I sat next to a Buddha of stone and wept into the punishing fluorescence, put my dark glasses on to guard me from the blinding shame and the gaze of others. But it failed me then, as our son's exuberant young teacher, oblivious to pain, sitting across the aisle with her husband, called out my name. I had to come up from hell and say hello. Couldn't she tell? How was it possible? Not the reading per se, but the armoring as aggression, as in the mission chair in his study into which he would retreat each evening, the book or newspaper more pressing than his son or wife, The shutters of his eyes slanted down onto the lines of any novel. Once, when I confronted him about lunch with his lover he swore was a friend, refusing to cancel and have lunch with me, that evening he scolded me. Why are the worst things always true? For having moved a single book in the living room. And I raged at him in front of our stunned son. And what did he do? He picked up the newspaper and read as though untouched by the whirlwind, as though I had become Job and he already my dead husband. I'm going to read a short poem, and then maybe I'm going to read a new thing so I remind myself that I'm still writing occasionally. I don't know about those of you who are writers. I don't feel like I've been writing a lot lately, but then I have to remind myself I have written a few things. This is maybe the only poem I've ever written that doesn't have an image in it, but I like it. And it really is about, I guess, the psychological workings of the mind through language. And if any of you remember R.D. Lang Knots, K-N-O-T-S, do you remember that book? I somehow think it's akin to that book, or what he was doing in that book. What I knew. He figured I knew. It suited him to figure I knew. But I didn't know. Or I didn't know I knew, when I asked him a leading question, until he alluded to it, when he could not really deny it, as though we were both in on it, as though the conversation had been ongoing and not new. He wanted me to know, yet hid it. He assumed I did know because he wanted it and he didn't want it, because he wanted not to have to say it, not to have to face the part of him that knew I didn't know, that knew I couldn't have known, or couldn't have known I knew, and continued. I didn't know I didn't want to know until I knew. When I first knew, I wanted to know more. That was one of the many things he refused to let me know. Now that I already knew, now that I already knew that I knew, these being the things I will never know, because in the end, he didn't want me to know. He didn't want part of himself to know. And then I'm going to end on a poem. Maybe it's lighter. I don't know if it is. I was thinking about all of the compound words that we have, and I was just interested in pulling them apart. What I've got. I've got the wander without the lust, got the spend with no thrift, got the spin without the drive, got the wind without the break, got leave with no taking. I've got no stream, but got the line, hit the wall without the flower, got no cat, but got the walk. I've got the hanky without the panky, got the days without the eye, even got the day without the light. I got the hole with no way. I've seen the rat without a tat. I've got the week without the end. But I've got the night with the mare. Got the goose with the flesh. Seen the fire with the fly. I got the dream without the boat. Got the love with the lorn. Got life still with the born. Okay, now I switch hats. Imaginary hat. And I'm going to introduce Kimiko Han, who is then going to take over for us. Okay, I tried to cut this down, but it's very hard. I'd really like to say something substantive about the other judge. So here goes, because you can look up all her awards and achievements and books and all that. Collage has been called the most important artistic innovation of the 20th century. In the 21st century, collage has become a cultural given, but many of us forget how much of it came out of modernism, and most of us don't even know that collage had its origin with Japanese calligraphers in the 12th century. How many of you knew that? Kimiko Han's poetry seems rooted in both traditions. As she says in various interviews, I was influenced by the modernists such as Williams and his book Patterson, so my aesthetics are very much shaped by classical East and modern West. As an undergraduate, I read Patterson, which even then began to subvert my notion of what a poem should look like. It gave so much permission. Think about Patterson with its lyric moments, its prose, its insertion of letters, old newspaper stories, its gaps and fragments, and then take a look at Kimiko Han's poetics, which I might call a kind of literary or cultural syncretism. For example, she takes a style of writing used by women in China or Japan, such as the nushu of her book Mosquito and Ant, and carries it over into American English, into a correspondence with the figure L, with contemporary concerns about her troubled marriage, her secret passions, her daughters. In The Narrow Road to the Interior, which is another book of hers, Han, with her background in American modernism, takes the Japanese prose poem form, the zuitsu, a journal form that allows her to, in her own words, include, quote, structural variety, list, diary, commentary, essay, poem, fragment. A sense of disorder might be artfully ordered by fragmenting, juxtaposing, contradicting, varying length, or even within a piece topic. Again, literary collage in Japan predates the West by about 800 years. It's an interesting thing about, but maybe I think it's about right? But it is Kimiko Han's genius well, actually, she's not just Japanese American, she's Japanese German American, actually, who retrieves these Asian forms written by women and translates them into a very contemporary feeling collage poem from a woman's perspective. Later in the book, she writes that it was cultivated by a woman and feels significant as a writing space for women. It is by its own nature a fragmented thing. And this is Kimiko Han speaking. I love long, erratic pieces into which I can thrash around, make a mess, lose the intellect. These great interviews of hers you should read, as well as her poems. Though she uses punningly, perhaps diaries and letters are too feminine or female to become cannon fodder, as in C-A-N-O-N, her insistent practice says otherwise, and this is to sort of misquote Ezra Pound, another modernist collage poet in a different context, to break the male canon, that is the first heave. Her latest book, Toxic Flora, was inspired by articles she read in the New York Times science section. Here we have a collage of a different sort. The language of science with its Latin names enters the lyric and cross-pollinates with it. Yet the human is always present in these poems, as well as the persistence of Han's feminist vision. She resists anthropomorphizing flowers or insects, for most of the poems are taken up with the meticulous details of naming, history, and sometimes the process of extinction of various species. At the end of the poem, she sidles up or juxtaposes her human concerns, her concerns as a woman, mother, lover, daughter. It is left up to the reader to decide what lessons one can draw from such analogies. For Han never offers a poetry of answers, but one of questions. And really what I admire about Kimiko Han's work is her restless search for these new forms, new vocabularies to bring over into poetry, this open-endedness in her work. And in the sequence of boxes with respect that have been printed here, with respect to Millay and Moore, to commemorate her work as this year's judge, Han has not so much captured lines from either poet as freed them from their contexts to assume other contexts and continue to explore the richness of collage in these modest, diaristic prose poems. Please join me in welcoming Kimiko Han.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks to Alex, Sarah, thanks to Sharon, and also I'm going to read their wonderful names to the artists who put this book together. Anna Paula Cordero and Brigitte Ellen Ewald. Are you both here? Yes, yes. So thank you so much.